Niloufar came from the West Coast and I just came from the Upper West Side, so I feel like I really didn't do much to get here tonight. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, everyone here, for creating this, and certainly thank you, World Poetry Books. It is really exciting to see what sort of books they are coming out with about poetry and translation that you really would not find anywhere else. I think we're in a great time for books in translation, and I encourage you all to read as much as possible in that area. And, of course, by this beautiful book. The one biography that wasn't told was Ahmad Shamlou's. Before that, though, I'm going to ask you all to try to silence your phones, and we will have time for Q&A later. So let me just give you the shortest bio, which seems kind of ridiculous, but the book itself is the largest bio. One of the most influential cultural figures of Iran in the latter half of the 20th century, Ahmad Shamlou, who was born in 1925, hence the 100th anniversary, and passed away in 2000, authored more than 70 books, including 18 volumes of poetry. Sometimes known by his pen name, Ahmad, Shamlou's innovations brought on a transition from the classical forms to free verse and made him a flag bearer of the Iranian vanguard, which of course included poets like... Okay, you got it. So that also included obviously the vanguard, whom you all know well. Shamlou's synthesis of Eastern and Western poetic traditions and the high and low styles democratized the literary mode without simplifying it. Championing the everyman, Shamlou's work reflects his deep engagement with social issues and the human condition, which certainly matters just as much today as it did then. Thank you.
Common love. Tears are a mystery, smiles a mystery, love a mystery. The tears of that night were the smile of my love. I am not a tale to be told, not a song to be sung, not a sound to be heard, nor something you can see or something you can know. I am common pain, cry me out. The tree speaks with the woods, the weed with the field, the star with the galaxy, and I speak with you. Tell me your name, give me your hand. Tell me your words, give me your heart. I have discovered your depths and spoken for all through your lips, and your hands are familiar with mine. I have wept in blazing solitude with you for the sake of the living, and sung with you in the darkest of graveyards, the most beautiful of songs, because the dead of this year were the most loving of the living. Give me your hand. Your hands know me, oh, you found at last. I speak with you as the cloud with the storm, the weed with the field, the rain with the sea, the bird with the spring, and the tree that speaks with the woods. For I have discovered your depths, for my voice is intimate with yours. You and me, the rain and the tree. I'm the spring, you're the earth. I'm the earth, you're the tree. I'm the tree, you're the spring. The touch of your rain fingers makes me bloom, crowns me king among the forests in bloom. You're vast like the night, moonlight or not. You're still vast like the night. You're the moonlight itself, truly the moonlight itself. Truth is, even when moonlight fades and the lonely night must still travel far to reach the gates of dawn. You're vast, deep like the night, just like the night. In fact, even when day comes, you're fresh like dew, like morning. You're like velvet clouds, the scent of grass, fine like that muslin of mist. Fine like that muslin of mist hanging over the scent of grass, like uncertainty. Stunned and unsure whether to stay or go, to die or live. You're like the snow, even if it all melts, leaving the mountains bare. You're the tall, proud peak, laughing at the dark clouds and the harsh winds. I'm the spring, you're the earth. I'm the earth, you're the tree. I'm the tree, you're the spring. The touch of your rain fingers makes me bloom, crowns me king among the forests in bloom.
Thank you for those. The first poem I ever heard of Shamlou's is Common Love, and I tried to translate it, not quite as well. But to me, the two that you started with sort of encapsulate to me two threads of his life. Leaving aside the innovative poetics, it's right, this guy lived through some of the most tormented decades of Iranian history and was involved with the politics on all different sides of that. He also traveled all over Iran and pulled together Iranian folk tales and different dialects, and it was just this incredibly encyclopedic understander, bringing in all this stuff in Iran. And in these poems to Aida, his beloved, the Iranian poetic tradition, right, draws on the lover beloved all the way through, whether it's, Rumi or Hafez or whatever. So can you briefly, although this will not be easy, kind of tell us who this guy is and how those threads play out in the work? Because the book tracks his life. And so a little bit of that would I think be useful.
Okay. Well, I organized the book chronologically, so all the poems are arranged as he recited them. And we have poems here from all 14 of his mature body of work. He grew up, well, I'll just read a short section from a much longer poem called Grappling with Silence, which he wrote much later in his lifetime, but it does sort of track his own life as he grew up. He was born in 1925, so it's 100 years ago. And so he was he was born between the two world wars, and he was witnessing a huge change in Iranian history. He grew up in a pretty bleak situation. So this is one page from a much longer poem. They waited for me in a bleak house by the sacred mirrored fountain near the mystic's shrine. Maybe that's why from the start I sensed the shadow of Satan lying in wait for me. At age 5, still reeling from the unthinkable blow of my own birth, I grew up rootless on salty sand, to the grunting of a drunken camel, to the ghostly presence of venomous snakes, in a dust bowl more distant than the fading memory of the last date palms at the edge of a vanished river. At age 5, With an empty bowl in hand, I ran through the naked dunes, chasing illusions ahead of my sister, still untouched by the amber allure of men. When I first laid eyes on grief-stricken Abel flogging himself, I was 6. The ceremonies were quite fitting. A rank of soldiers, a silent parade of cold chest palms, a vibrant flag rippling in splendor, the blare of trumpets and the merciless pounding of drums, all to keep Abel from pawing at the sound of his own sobbing. So in this poem, he is painting the picture of one of his first memories, which is a public flogging of a lowly soldier. And he always considered this moment to be his birth as a poet. So even though it's a much later poem, I thought that this was a good way to introduce the conditions that led to Shamlou being Shamlou.
A number of the poems that I found most moving are dedicated to fellow poets and fellow protesters and resistance, and some of them you indicate are written from prison. I know that he was part of the Tudeh Party, which was a communist party in Iran, and was in and out of jail. Can you tell us a bit about his political life before we get to Aida? And if you have them, a couple of poems that come out of that experience?
Yes. The Flame of a Silent Fort. A woman silently wept from dusk to dawn. She moaned from dusk to dawn, wishing me to rise and become a light, to hang on the people's porch. A woman moaned from dusk to dawn, but alas, her silent sobbing didn't rouse me. The flame of the people's silent fort set my night ablaze and burned by dawn. The flame of the silent fort, sunken fort, its corridors and gates reduced to cinders, yes, the flame of the silent fort, not the woman's night weeping until dawn. And that was written to his mother. I have another poem I'd like to read for you. It's called Letter. Even though Shamlou is known for really modernizing Persian poetry and Persian poetics and helping finish the journey that his predecessors started in breaking with rhyming schemes to arriving at free verse, he has recited one poem in the traditional form of qasida, and that's the letter that he writes from prison to his father. His father was a mid-level military man and was keen on Shamlou repenting and signing a repentance letter drafted by the Tudeh Party, to which he belonged for, but he may not have even belonged, but he was politically active with them for a very short period of time before he realized that writing was really his real calling. His father was trying to convince him to sign this letter, and Shamlou,
to get him out of jail.
To get him out of jail. And Shamlou writes a very long letter to his father. It's my pleasure to read this poem here for you tonight, not only to illustrate the force of his conviction and his totemic sort of stature in the voice of resistance in the 20th century, but also because my dear collaborator Liz has her footprints all over this translation. She was one of the people in our Jedi, what I call a Jedi Council, 4 or 5 people who helped to read these works and make them so much better. And so originally I took the longer qasida and I translated it into a rhyming poem. And then I decided to summarize it because it is long. And I put it in prose form, and then Liz very brilliantly just broke up that prose form into couplets. So it's exactly the same text, but it's just so much better the way Liz formatted it. So I'm going to read just excerpts from it. This is written from prison. Shamlou was imprisoned a few times. Father, when things get hard, truth doesn't hide. It stares you down. I've known this all along, but you? You vanish every time. Once again, you've dropped the fight, run off with your courage, nowhere in sight, leaving me tangled in the enemy's trap, in hopes I'll quit. But I've told you again and again that it's not power I crave, but bread and light. Here I stand unchained, unafraid. One signature, that's all it'd take to unbolt my prison door. I stood so tall, so high, even the great Seymour's wings, strong as they are, would shed their feather and fall. What's a little self-inflicted pain, or a self-built prison you call home? You're one of us, Father dear. So why sing out of tune? Why can't you face the truth? Why do you so fear to leave the burning heights, to lose your wooden throne and the jewels of its paper crown? You've gained nothing but wind, yet you trust the windbags who sold it to you. They've cut us down with their hate, snuffed out knowledge, torched our books. The blood of my comrades soaks the earth. Don't turn your cold gaze on this red dawn. Check the chronicles of the East. Each page tells of a new win. Save my skin, but sell my soul, trade truth for lies? Should I turn away from the sunrise and sink into the incoming dark? Sell my honor for fool's gold? Don't weigh me down with weak advice. You amble along your peaceful road. Me, I'll walk danger's path.
You know, I'm always struck. Farrokhzad, the modern Iranian modernist that I translated, knew Shamlou. They have poems that are in conversation with each other. And I'm always just struck about how in Iran, as in some other countries, but not really ours, poetry puts you at risk, and physically at risk, like you can be shot for. And that's certainly, you know, the case here. One of the other things that struck me was as you go through the poems in the book, you have these poems where Aida, like the poem that you opened with, which is, oh, you're the rain on the tree. As it goes forward, my sense is that she morphs. It's not just the woman, the beloved, but that she takes on and has a different role in his life. Can you talk a little about that? And if you got a poem or two that speaks to that evolution, I think that would be interesting.
Yes. So Shamlou met his third wife, and who was still living, Hydra Series, in 1961, and they were married in 1964. Shamlou's poetry changed as a result of this meeting, not only because he was just growing in his work, and he was gaining more and more of a foothold in his own language that he was inventing, but also because Ida was the perfect muse, wife, assistant, steward, who made it possible for him to have a stable living environment and a domestic life so that he wouldn't have to sort of, go from home to home and hovel to hovel and sort of live this nomadic life that wasn't conducive to productivity. So the Ida in Shamlou's poems, he has 2 books dedicated to Ida, but also he has many other poems that are written in the name of or sort of inspired by the idea of sort of this ideal love that Ida represented, which was both an actual embodiment of who Ida was, but also an actual sort of manufactured ideal of what a partner, a woman, should be. This one is one of his many nocturnal poems. It's Among the Eternal Suns. Among the eternal suns, your beauty is an anchor, a sun that frees me from the dawn of all stars. Your gaze is the fall of tyranny, a gaze that dressed my bare soul in love, so fully that now the darkest night of never feels like nothing but a comedy of ironies. Your eyes told me tomorrow is a new day, eyes that spark love, and now your love, a weapon to wrestle with my fate. I had thought the sun lay beyond the horizon, that no escape remained but an early exit, or so I had believed. Then came Ida, undoing the eternal exit. Among the eternal suns, your beauty is an anchor, your gaze the fall of tyranny. And your eyes told me, tomorrow is a new day. Song of our meeting. Who are you that I so trustingly speak my name to you, hand the keys of my home to you, share the bread of my joy with you, sit alongside you and sleep so peacefully at your knees? Who are you that I so solemnly linger with in the country of my dreams? Legend is that he wrote this poem at this time when they met in 1961. Shamlou had moved into his mother's house after a second divorce, and Ida's family was their neighbor. And Ida was, I think, 16 or 17, he was 35, and they would see each other from the balcony, and the rest is history. But after they met and they had confessed love to each other, Ida comes in to visit him one day at his mother's house, and he sees this poem. She sees this poem scribbled on the wall in pencil, and it was published exactly as is. And it's because he woke up in the middle of the night and the poem had come to him and he didn't have paper. Ida in the mirror. Your lips, tender as a poem, turn the most carnal kisses into innocence, so pure they could make a caveman human. Your cheeks, two slant lines, steering your pride and my fate. I, who braved the night defenseless, waiting for dawn, retrieved from the brothels of trade and noble virginity untouched. No one ever fought harder to destroy themselves as I have fought to live. Your eyes hold the secret of fire. Your love is the triumph of humankind, charging into battle with fate. Your embrace, a close shelter to live in, a place to die in, an escape from the city that with 1,000 shameless fingers condemns the sky's purity. Mountains are born of the first stone, humans of the first pain. In me lived a cruel prisoner, long deaf to the sound of his chains, until your first glance brought me to life. Tempests play their majestic tune on a reed flute in your grand dance, while the song of your veins summons the eternal sun. Let me rise so the city streets feel my presence. Your hands a gesture of peace, friends that help me forget enmity. Your brow a high, radiant mirror where the 7 sisters reach their beauty. 2 restless birds sing in your chest. Which path will summer take to sweeten our thirst? Waiting for you to appear, I stared into the mirror for a lifetime. Weeping pools and oceans. O fairy-like creature in human form, whose body burns only in the flames of falsehood. Your presence is paradise, justifying the flight from hell, a sea that swallows me whole, to wash away my sins and lies. And dawn awakens in your hands.
I am, because I'm feeling like, we have these people captive here, and we can't make them listen to the whole book, but I do want to kind of do the highlights too. So, one of the things that interests me about Shamlou relative to some of the other modernists is that not only did he live through the revolution in '79, but he lived for a while after it. And so that chapter 2 of Iran's history was processed in his work, which is quite extraordinary. So I have 2 requests for you. One is, I want you to read In This Dark Alleyway, because it's my favorite poem. And I also think that it would be useful to read 3 or 4 or 5, a couple of poems that really come from his late work that pulled together, his suffering, the betrayals, his loves, the changes around him, the history of Iran, and, how through language and his life, he kind of pulled all of that together. I'm not sure The Dark Alleyway was on your list, but...
I was a little bit, I think I know which poem you're talking about. It has a
Right.
different title, In This Dead-End Street.
There you go.
In this dead-end street. They sniff your breath to see if you've dared say, I love you. They sniff your heart. These are strange times, my dear. They whip love at the barricade post. We must hide love in the closet. In this icy, winding, dead-end street, they feed their fire by burning poems and songs. Don't even risk thinking. These are strange times, my dear. The one who knocks in the dead of night has come to kill the light. We must hide light in the closet. Butchers stand at crossroads with bloodied cleavers and chopping blocks. These are strange times, my dear. They surgically slice smiles from lips and songs from mouths. We must hide joy in the closet. Canaries roast over a fire of jasmine and lilies. These are strange times, my dear. Drunk on victory, Satan sits at the feast of our mourning. We must hide God in the closet. This was recited right after the revolution, so it was the Islamic Republic, and I would venture to say that Satan is the Ayatollah.
I hope it was outside the country when that got published.
I don't think so.
Yet there were a cluster of poems that we were talking about that sort of come from that late work, whichever ones you love.
Song of the Greatest Wish. Ah, if freedom could sing a song so small, like a bird's throat, no wall left in ruins would ever stand. It wouldn't take years to see that every ruin speaks of human absence, while every presence is renewal. Like a wound that bleeds all its life, a wound that beats a dry pain all its life, that opens its eyes to the world with a cry and turns away from itself in hatred. Such was the great absence. Such was the story of ruin. Ah, if freedom could sing a song so small, smaller even than a tiny bird's throat. Shamlou is dubbed the master poet of freedom in Iran. So freedom was sort of foremost on his mind as he constructed a body of work and a life of resistance. The Ayatollah appears once again in this poem. I can't help but be beautiful. I can't help but be beautiful, a flirtation in eternal light. I'm so beautiful that spring spontaneously bursts into bloom in my wake. In my world, blood is never the spirit laid bare, and the fear of lead doesn't deter the partridge from its strut. I'm so beautiful that Allahu Akbar, God is great, can only describe me. I'm venom before you, a poison with no cure. If the world is beautiful, it's only because it sings of me. You imbecile, you. I'm not your rival. I'm your very denial.
So Mandana and I want you to talk a little bit about his legacy, both in Iranian poetry and in the country and diaspora, and maybe wrap up with one or two, because I'm sure people have questions, aside from me.
So you asked about his legacy?
Yeah, so where does he, yeah, that was it.
Yes. Well, think about, the relevance of Shamlou at 100. He's relevant to several million people because several million people are Iranian, and he was the poet witness of the 20th century for Iranians. But I think of our society now and what the world is coming to and the challenges that we have now in fighting for basic rights. And I think that a poet like Shamlou is just as relevant today as he was in his time and in his own country. In that sense, he's a world poet. He's a poet whose stakes are ethical stakes and moral stakes and aesthetic stakes are timeless and universal. Any artist who speaks truth to power and who chooses to seek the struggles of the people and to capture that language and to create a language for a people to understand their own plight and to have language to express their plight is a timeless and ageless poet. So that's what I think about Shamlou at 100. I feel that we are just starting another century of Shamlou, and now in English with a new readership, because I think he speaks to the truths of our time now as well. That's what I think about his legacy.
So I'm going to ask a question before we get started with everyone else, and please don't be shy. All your questions are going to be outstanding. Would you read an excerpt, perhaps, of one of your favorite poems in the original Persian? Of course. That's my own selfish question, because I love hearing Niloufar recite poetry.
That's the smart one.
Thank you. We'll check it out.
This is the Persian original of the first poem I read, Common Love. I apologize if I have to cough. عشق عمومی. عشق رازیست، لبخند رازیست، عشق رازیست. اشک آن شب لبخند عشقم بود. قصه نیستم که بگویی، نغمه نیستم که بخوانی، صدا نیستم که بشنوی، یا چیزی چنان که ببینی یا چیزی چنان که بدانی. من درد مشترکم، مرا فریاد کن. درخت با جنگل سخن میگوید، علف با صحرا، ستاره با کهکشان، و من با تو سخن میگویم. نامت را به من بگو، دستت را به من بده، حرفت را به من بگو، قلبت را به من بده. من ریشه های تو را دریافتم، با لبانت برای همه لبها سخن گفتم، و دستهایت با دستان من آشناست. در خلوت روشن با تو گریستم برای خاطر زندگان، و در گورستان تاریک با تو خوانده‌ام زیباترین سرودها را، زیرا که مردگان این سال عاشق‌ترین زندگان بودند. دستت را به من بده، دستهای تو با من آشناست. ای دیر یافته با تو سخن میگویم، به سان ابر که با طوفان، به سان علف که با صحرا، به سان باران که با دریا، به سان پرنده که با بهار، به سان درخت که با جنگل سخن میگوید. زیرا که من ریشه های تو را دریافتم، زیرا که صدای من با صدای تو آشناست.
I think they need an audiobook. I request an audiobook, please. So maybe we'll get one of those sometime soon.
I'd like to read one more poem for you before Q&A. I like reading this poem last because it's one of the last poems that he wrote, but it's a bookend poem. It's about birth and death. And I think on a centennial, what better poem to end with, start a new century with. As Mandana mentioned, Shamlou's pen name was Aleph Bamdad, which translates into a dawn or a daybreak. Written in dawn's blood, death was unlacing its boots when the rooster's call split the crystal dawn. I've been listening to the rooster's call since the brittle moment of my birth. Death was unlacing its boots when the yellow-crested hoopoe set out for the plain without its silver comb. I've looked for the fallen crown with my own eyes since the watchful moment of my birth. Death was unlacing its boots when the strutting partridge cast a careless laugh down the hillside. I've struggled to down the cup of mirth since the tearful moment of my birth. Death was unlacing its boots when the blooming tree donned its dusty robe. I've waited for bitter autumn since the dismal moment of my birth. Death was unlacing its boots when the black feathered bird sang its farewell song on autumn's branch. I ended my wait, moment by bitter moment, with the crimson pen name of dawn. با تخلص خونین بامداد مرگ آنگاه پا تا به همی گشود که خروس سحرگهی بانگی همه از بلور سر میداد. گوش به بانگ خروسان در سپردم هم از لحظه ترد میلاد خیش. مرگ آنگاه پا تا به همی گشود که پک زرد خال بی شانه نقره به صحرا سر می نهاد. به چشم تاجی به خاک افکنده جستم هم از لحظه نگران میلاد خیش. مرگ آنگاه پا تا به همی گشود که کبک خرامان خنده غفلت به دامن سر می داد. به در کشیدن جام قهقه همت نهادم هم از لحظه گریان میلاد خیش. مرگ آنگاه پا تا به همی گشود که درخت بهار پوش رخت غبارآلوده به قامت می آراست. چشم به راه خزان تلخ نشستم هم از لحظه نومید میلاد خیش. مرگ آنگاه پا تا به همی گشود که هزار سیاه پوش بر شاخسار خزانی ترانه بدرود ساز می کرد. با تخلص سرخ بامداد به پایان بردم لحظه لحظه تلخ انتظار خیش.
Questions? Someone has a question. Thank you.
So that the excerpt you read about his letter to the father. So were they estranged, or they were always estranged?
Not always, they were going back and forth.
And how old was he when he wrote that letter?
He wrote it in 1970, but it's backdated to 1954, and there's a note in the book about why that was, for censorship reasons. So in 1970, he would have been 45 in prison.
Yes, please.
I know that Shamlou was always against Islamic Republic, but also he was he was part of today, and obviously against the Shah and that era. Though we know his golden years was during the Shah time, and one person who was always supporting him was the Queen. I just want to know, since you read all his work and poems, or at least most of them, and you studied this person, was there any time that he regret that why he was fighting it during the Shah time, or was it lost? I just want to know, have you ever noticed that he's trying to say such a thing? Like, I was wrong, and this is a bad era, not when I was young and working at Qanun and doing all translation, and everybody was like avant-garde and intellectual, and today everything is just destroyed. Has he ever mentioned that?
It's such a great question, and it's such a layered and nuanced question that deserves a much longer time for me to be able to answer that. But so I think, let me just recap your question. That is that while he was opposing the Shah's regime before the revolution, and then of course afterwards opposing the Islamic Republic, did he ever sort of go back and in contrast sort of admit that the Shah's regime was a better time? Am I understanding your question correctly? That, better time for Iran, that it was less of a tyranny. And you mentioned that the Queen, Farah, was supporting some of his work. I recently heard that she paid for one of his operations. He had many physical ailments. And I can neither confirm that nor deny that. I don't know. I don't have the documents to know whether that is true or not. But this is what I would say. So many of us take funding from the many foundations that we take funding from, and most of that is blood money, right? So the robber barons who have set up foundations, and we benefit from those foundations. So how are we supposed to live existentially with that as well? I think about that a lot myself. I don't believe that Shamlou would ever go back and say that in contrast to the Islamic Republic, the reign of the Shah was a better tyranny. I know that she would never say that. But we can sort of keep in context the fact that one tyranny doesn't have to be a lesser of a tyranny, and that the struggle for freedom for Shamlou was sort of pan-cultural, and it went across time and nation. So I don't imagine that he would go back and sort of kowtow. In fact, on Sunday night, a lovely lady from the Qanun Sandagan, the Association of Writers, Iranian Writers, was there, and she and I were confirming notes because Shamlou was was offered a position to work on the Encyclopedia Iranica. And he came to the US. He was living in Princeton, and he was about to start work at Columbia, where the Encyclopedia was housed at the time. And on the last minute, he found out that the money for his salary had come from the Queen, and he returned the money and refused the position. So, this is not scholarship at all. These are mostly anecdotal to me, and it's very difficult for me to verify what is true and what is not, and when things happened, and exactly what the details are. But just knowing him personally, I know that he would never think one tyranny is better than another. That answered your question in such a short time.
Sorry if I forgot to let her down.
No, you're good.
So what about this communist little face?
Yeah. So he never finished school because his military father was dragging the family around faraway parts of Iran, and he just had no encouragement at home, and discontinued sort of education, and he dropped out before finishing school, and he immediately, so this would have been around World War II, sort of got involved politically because he started to understand what foreign meddling was, the havoc that it was wreaking in Iran. And so, you know, the Tudeh party, the Communist Party, was, I don't believe that he was ever an official member, but he was sort of agit-propping with them, and he was doing some activism. But it was very, very immediate. I mean, and I think it was mutual that both parties realized this is not a good match, and Shamlou really wanted to write.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, please.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to thank you for this enormous labor of love and all of this huge gift that you give us as readers. I've been carrying around an Ahmad Shamlou book in Farsi for 20 years, and I speak Farsi, but I can't read Farsi. And that kind of being literate and illiterate in my own, you know, mother tongue is something that, you know, I think a lot of us struggle with in exile. But I felt his presence always like next to my nightstand, and I just wanted to acknowledge what a big gift this is.
Thank you so very much. It was difficult to penetrate the work for me as well. And I had a lovely friend, teacher, and I created a word for him. He would not accept teacher. And I said, how can you not, you know, let me call you teacher, because you taught me how to read these poems. So in Persian, the word for friend is dust, and the word for teacher is ostad. So I called him Dustad.
If I may, what your question brings up, and certainly this book that I hope you all will buy, poetry is a relationship. You don't read a book of poetry and you're done with it, and the book is certainly never going to be done with you. So I know I'll be reading this book for many years to come, and as I change, the poems are going to seem very different to me. So I appreciate that too.
Thank you for being such an, I'm not saying this to finish the conversation, but you're a wonderful audience. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the organizers for making this evening happen. I didn't get a chance to do that in the beginning.
One of the poems that you read, I couldn't recognize the Farsi version, which was about like, I'm so lovable as Allahu Akbar.
Oh yeah. That one is I Can't Help But Be Beautiful, and the Persian title is نمیتوانم زیبا نباشم. It's from مدایح بی‌صله, Unrewarded Eulogies.
How long did he stay in prison over the years?
I think one of the stints was a little over a year, and I don't know the other ones, they were shorter. Yeah, that's all.
What kind of breaks?
Years and years. Yeah. I think what's great about Shamlou's stature as he grew into his presence is that, you know, he never went to prison. He was never imprisoned during the Islamic Republic. So in 1979, 1980, even though he was continuing to be who he was and to recite the later poems that I read about Satan and being the very denial of the imbecile, they never touched him. So
Is that because he was
great.
just so famous?
That's right. He was so famous. But at the same time, you know, his contemporaries were being apprehended and tortured. So who knows? Yes.
There's this like recurring title convention throughout the various collections that make up the book called Nocturnal. Shawanan, it's nocturnal, little parentheses in between. What do you think the function of that title, the recurringness of that title, has in his body of work? I mean, the book spans such a long period of time, so is he recurrent?
He recited poems that were called nocturnal throughout his career. And the parenthetical is just the first line so that you can recognize it in an index. What is the significance? I think he was sleepless and these poems would come to him. He always said that poems came to him fully formed and he was just transcribing them.
Question over here, maybe for all three of you, or any of you, to say something about Shamlou as a translator, because from what I hear, and since, you know, translation's important to me, obviously, from what I hear, he translated a lot of really important work into Persian, and it had impact, different kinds of impact. He would read it publicly, or from what I understand. So who were those poets? Why did he translate them? And what was the effect? If you could talk about, if any of you want to say anything about that.
Yes, well, he came to get himself an education in world literature and aesthetics and the aesthetic movements of the time by reading world literature, and then his way of absorbing that was through translation. Now, he spoke some French and maybe a little bit of English, but he did his translations from dozens of languages through third language translations, as well as through intermediaries. Now, his own, so he translated, you know, Langston Hughes, Lorca, haiku poetry, Russian literature, German literature, Greek literature. Somebody said a language here.
No, I said Margaret Beagle.
Margaret Bickle, German. That's right, Bickle, German. Yeah, he. So in this way, I really think that Shamlou is a world poet, because he did sort of collect everything that he learned from reading other writers from other borders, beyond other borders, and then sort of bringing those ideas into the 20th century work that he was doing. His own philosophy of translation was that you could really rewrite the text, but not if you're translating him. You have to be very faithful to him, and it's one of the dichotomies in how he thought and you know, his ideas about translation.
Well, to build on Matthew's question, I know that when Farrokhzad was in Italy and Germany, she and her brother, I think in Germany, were translating German and French surrealists from a German anthology into Persian, and that surrealism had a huge impact on her. Can you see in Shamlou's work the impact of his integrating this foreign poetry?
Absolutely. That would be a whole other reading, a whole other session. I'm starting to actually collect more and more notes. I have some notes in this book about sort of the synergy that I see between Paul Éluard's poetry and Shamlou. I see direct transference of inspiration from Éluard, and I have some notes in there for readers. So definitely, he was very much reading Sartre and the French surrealists and the symbolists and Russian literature at the time. So I'm starting to see more and more actually concrete evidence, you know, line by line, where I see where he might have really been inspired, directly inspired by these other writers and poets. Liz translates Farrokhzad, as Matre mentioned. She has a translation of Farrokhzad, and Farrokhzad is called On the Wind. What is the title?
Let Us Believe in the Beginning of the Cold Season,
which is the title of Farrokhzad's fifth and last book of poems. And Farrokhzad preceded Shamlou by a few years, and she of course died very young. And Shamlou has an elegy which I've translated for Farrokhzad. and both of those, both Shamlou and Farosat were great modernists, and they really are pioneers in changing Persian language in the 20th century.
Any more questions?
We'll still have the chance to come and
We could talk informally.
Yes, actually, I want to say that my dear friend who had to leave early dropped by and brought some wonderful baklava, and we have a candle, and at some point, please partake, we're celebrating a birthday after all, and at some point, we'll have you all blow out some candles. Thank you so much for tasting.
I'd just like to say thank you. Hydra Von Bar is just honored to have hosted this and for this wonderful birthday party for this marvelous, powerful poet. Come back next week. We're a monthly reading series, but this month we're doing 2 events. Next week it's Nan Z Da, and her book is The Chinese Tragedy of King Lear. So we hope you'll come. If you want to give me your email and to hear more about Hydra Von Bar, just talk to me, or you can go to the hydravonbar.com for the schedule. So thank you so much. Thanks to Karin. Thanks to Scott. Thanks to World Poetry. And bravo, bravo.
Beautiful.